WormAI is a standalone AI that can be applied to any game engine with 3D vector spaces, raycasting mechanisms, and conventional surface geometry. In this video, we will present the notion of automated navigation mapping, navigation meshes, and apply it in the Sven co-op game, which is in the Gold Source engine. One kind of navigation mesh generation will be demonstrated throughout. These are a series of tools that come along with the AI that provide for automated navigation generation. In specific, depending on the kind of surface you want to map out, it provides triangulation for terrain and complicated surfaces, or rectangular generation for more palpable surfaces. That is, surfaces that are simpler to define. A navigation mesh, or more generally a mesh, is a joined set of polygons that define a space in spaces of at least 2 dimensions. Let's look at some of the benefits of navigation meshes. Consider space complexity, for example, of a set of nodes in a traditional search space, such as a graph or a waypoint set. Consider the common case of a mapper placing graph nodes onto a world space in no regard for sufficiency for functionality. Or consider the case in which a large amount of nodes are required to sufficiently describe a traversable space. In both cases, the space complexity is far larger than needed. So then, in conclusion, we can say that search space is reduced, which results in less computation time for searches if we use a navigation mesh. Intuitively, you can consider a set of nodes which need not be searched through in the first place, but are required in order to get to other nodes with respect to something like a typical graph search. Let's look at Unreal Engine's website for various other considerations. In particular, let's consider raycasting. There are some cases in which, in conventional search spaces, or where there is no search space at all, the AI will have to perform a raycast in order to determine whether they can get from point A to point B. Or if you have a search space, you want to determine whether you can get to point B from point A simply by traversing the world space without consideration to the graph. If you can do that, then effectively you avoid conducting a costlier search. So, an optimal pre-processing measure, in summary, is one that circumvents computation time via raycast toward a desired location. If the raycast successfully crossed to the coordinate point, then no search is required. So we can merely check if the point is inside the polygon when it comes to navigation meshes. This avoids raycast entirely. In particular, if 2 points are in the navigation mesh, that is, they are in a particular polygon, we merely determine whether that other point, the desired location, is also in the polygon. And even if it's not inside the polygon, a line intersection test to the desired location can be done beforehand. Determining if a point is inside the polygon is constant time for rectangles and logarithmic time for convex polygons. Line intersection along a set of convex polygons can cleverly be done in n log n time for this specific problem given certain invariants on the polygon data structures. Let's look at continuity, as we mentioned before. Meshes provide us with a continuous representation of the world space. Waypoints, on the other hand, are a poor representation of the world space. Consider the sparseness of the average waypoint set. In effect, you're providing the AI with a point cloud, effectively giving little information for cohesive navigation. Unreal Engine gives us a few examples of where continuity would be useful. Not to mention, in particular, that you can think of a case in which you yourself would be provided with a point cloud. Effectively imagine that you are given a piece of paper and you cannot look away from this paper. On the piece of paper are half a dozen points. You're not told anything about the geometric composition of the world around you, you are just given 6 points, and you're told to get from point A to point B, not knowing that perhaps there are walls throughout every step of the way. The solution would obviously be to do a raycast or build a path as needed. But suppose you were given the same paper, you were given the same set of points, and you were told that you were going to be bombed, that various bombs were going to hit arbitrarily in this space, and you have to find cover. The bombs are going towards you, so perhaps you'd want to run away from the bombs, but where exactly should you go? In this case, even a simple ray trace cannot save you. This is quite common in some games like Skyrim, in which the AI are provided with a navigation mesh, and edges and polygons in the mesh are labeled as cover areas. In that case, you can immediately build a path or merely arrive at a cover area without a search, and you're good. As for the AI that's given the point cloud, it's not likely that they'll be smart enough to know where to go to hide. RCBot is the, quote, best bot for Sven Co-op 4.8, unquote, on the Sven Co-op website, mostly because it is the only bot for Sven Co-op, which, interestingly enough, also makes it the worst bot for Sven Co-op 4.8. Here is an example of a room wherein at least a half dozen points exist, where you would only need one mesh node. Effectively, you're reducing, in this case, the search space by 6. Path nodes, unlike waypoints, which I distinguish specifically, in particular, I consider waypoints to be basically a point cloud, except that points are connected to each other, that is, their nearest neighbors. But there is no strong and intuitively optimal connection to other locations. As a result, waypoints are incapable of providing complicated search routines. Path nodes, unlike waypoints, are far better than waypoints because they can provide for these things. In effect, they're as connected as they can be if they are optimally built. However, even with path nodes, you have a discrete interpretation of the world space, reducing power and the potential utility of having continuity. Also consider dynamic collision. Say that you have a box that a player randomly put in a world space. You can use the bounding box of an obstacle as a polygon in and of itself, projected from the XY plane. So no raycast is required to determine an alternate path. Let's look at the notion of automation. Automation means automatically generated navigation meshes are more difficult for their respective algorithms to encounter an adversary. The adversary would be the surface geometry input. Mappers don't tend to build poorly composed surface geometry. If they did, the players wouldn't be able to travel very well, and I would imagine that the map wouldn't be very popular. But consider the case, as mentioned before, of a user-defined graph, in which a common mapper does not give attention to sufficiency and what it means for the necessity of a graph to be sparse. That is to say, that if the whole point of navigation is to get from point A to point B, then there is no need to define other nodes if you're merely trying to get from point A to point B, except in the case wherein you are trying to further describe the world space, that is, to provide a more descriptive, more accurate search space to navigate through. And how about advanced AI capabilities when it comes to these search spaces? What if you wanted to introduce a large AI unit? How could you tell where it could fit if you were given a point cloud? You certainly know that you can go to point A, but you don't know anything about the geometry around you, so how could you tell if the bounding box can fit? Well, again, you would need a raycast to measure available travel space of a region, which is again a poor approximation. There's also embedded information in the polygons in a navigation mesh to provide for the ease of implementation of various complex combat techniques. Consider things such as strafing across a floor, or jumping large distances, or jumping from one mesh to another, like jumping over holes, from heights, over bridges, etc., shooting around corners, shooting over walls, and any other creative measure that you can think of that takes advantage of a continuous surface geometry. It also, again, has things like geometric information in relation to the objectives of the AI, such as cover spots, retreat points, so on and so forth. Let's look in specific at pathfinding with respect to navigation meshes. Let's compare some cases. Gold Source Engine provides game AI with a path node graph for navigation. This is typically sufficient for intermediate navigation capabilities, although it is still sparse and it is generally a larger search space. It is smart enough, however, to calculate the shortest and or best path. RCBot, on the other hand, has a near-sighted navigation system. RCBots are incapable of following a cogent and cohesive path. They are also unable to formulate objectives. They are unable to follow or track an entity at any distance and travel a non-trivial intermediate path. Let's take this maze as an example. The shortest path from A to B is obvious. So let's see how the Half-Life AI fares at this specific task. As you can see, the grunt was able to find the player. In fact, even when I try to trick the AI by teleporting again to a different destination, the AI remains on the best path. I teleport when the AI is about halfway to my original destination. So let's use this little hover drone that is powered by WormAI to test our case. Let's see if WormAI can travel to the player at a non-trivial location. As of the moment, the AI will use suboptimal paths, but implementing an optimal pathing network from certain meshes to certain other meshes and from certain nodes to other nodes can be easily done in pre-processing, which will save a lot more time. Now we'll do the same trick to see if it remains on the best path. We'll teleport when it's halfway to the original path and see if it stays at the same path. That is the cheapest/best path. As it stands, RCBot is incapable of non-trivial navigation, so we cannot test it with this example. The next steps in the future versions will be to implement terrain optimal meshes, which can be implemented, as we said, with triangulation and optimized with Delaunay triangulations, as well as implement advanced AI navigation such as opening doors, triggering elevators and riding them, ranged attack calculations, and so on and so forth.
Okay, I'll secure this area.